When we formed Mainline Pictures back in '87, we received, oh my God, I think something like 6,000 submissions the first 18 months. We were frantic to get something in not only development, but obviously into production. And one of the properties that caught our eye was Boxing Helena. And in reading the log line and the coverage, I was so intrigued by the content of this film and its apparent execution that, needless to say, I picked it up and read it right away. And in reading it, I found myself so engrossed with the content of the story and the metaphors and all the different levels that existed and had to meet the mind behind it. And I'll never forget the first time I met Jennifer. She walked in and was wearing a bustier, sporting her tattoo, and with a short blonde cropped haircut. And she was so endearing, articulate, and intelligent that I was so naturally drawn to her. I couldn't imagine anybody else bringing this material to life but her. Well, needless to say, in Hollywood, when you are working within the Hollywood system to make an independent film, you can break a lot of rules and you can make a movie as attractive as this movie is in its production value for a lot less money than a studio. However, you still need to follow some basic rules, and one of the most important rules is casting. Ultimately, you're going to have to move video units and collateralize risk and get some marquee value, and we needed a star or somebody who was able to help us secure some financing. And when I first read it, the character of Helena just reminded me directly of Madonna. And even though Madonna's career was somewhat slow at the time, putting Madonna in this movie was like putting John Wayne in a Western. There wasn't a lot of acting necessary. She just had to be herself, sort of like a personality. Sure enough, after doing some slight modifications to the development of the screenplay, we submitted it to Madonna, and she immediately met Jennifer, and one thing led to another, and we had Madonna in our movie. We were very excited that Madonna wanted to do the project, and we proceeded to close her deal, which we did, and announced the film at MIFED, which is the film market that takes place every year in October in Milan, Italy, and it was received quite well. We proceeded into pre-production, and with not only Madonna, but Bill Pullman and Ed Harris committed to do the movie. And for some still to this day unknown reason, Madonna, on the eve of coming in to start the prosthetic molds and to meet wardrobe people and etc., we received a phone call from her agent who told us Madonna was no longer doing the movie and couldn't tell us why, but that was that, and it was over. And obviously, if you were in our shoes, it was a very black day for us that day in December 1990, because we had to terminate our pre-production and fire a lot of people, and obviously saw a lot of money thrown away forever on the attempt to make the movie with, at that time, what was once a very passionate star towards our project, a woman who had said that every time I read the screenplay, it's as if you put a tape recorder under my bed at night. That's a quote. And she went from that enthusiastic to, never hearing from her again. In any event, in an attempt to salvage the pre-production in December of '90, we sought out many stars, and we felt that Madonna and her story notes actually enhanced the character some more, and the screenplay was better than ever. And we thought, well, let's make an offer to Kim Basinger, which we did. But she was unable to perform acting services for another 6 months. We again went through the same hoops, but with this time a lot more caution. Most definitely, we went through contractual arrangements that every single solitary movie goes through, regardless if it's a independent or a major feature film. And waited for Miss Basinger, who seemed to be even more enthusiastic than Madonna, and went into pre-production again, feeling very confident that everything was A-OK, to discover that 3 weeks from shooting, Miss Basinger changed agents, and her new agent was not very keen on the material and said some disparaging things about the screenplay, which induced her breach of contract. She, at that point, called up and pretty much within 10 days was off the movie. now we had even a bigger disaster on our hands because we were further into it. We had spent more money. We had closed some, God, I don't know, dozen or more contracts internationally to sell the picture. And it was really more horrific than the first time. More importantly, the industry was looking at us and our small production company and wondering what the heck's going on with these people. Why do actresses keep leaving the projects? It's a good question. We kept asking ourselves that too. We weren't provoking them in leaving. They just, I think when push came to shove, they were probably a little bit scared of their abilities to deliver the performance or of just the subject matter itself. It was a very demanding role for a woman. It took a lot of guts to do. And most likely, as the time got closer, their confidence was shaken in some way. We were so upset by this that we, attempted to reach Miss Basinger and ask her to please settle her bill at Mainline Pictures unsuccessfully. So we filed a lawsuit within 16 or 20 days after she quit the picture and proceeded to, again, recast the picture and reproduce the picture because ultimately one must find financing again and distribution outlets, etc. Well, as I stated earlier, we had an image problem. Not only do we have an image problem from the agency route and what's wrong with this movie and why is it plagued with these disasters, but now certain foreign distributors who had purchased the movie once or twice were now ready for bargain basement prices, and we didn't have a lot of bargaining power. We finally decided on Cheryl and Finn, I think November of 1991, and in the process lost Ed Harris, so it was sort of taking one step forward to take another step back. Again, we continued the casting process and had our cast lined up sometime, I believe, in April of 92, which was Julian Sands, Cheryl and Finn, Bill Paxton. You see them all in the credits of this movie. We weren't out of the woods yet. We had quite a year, not only making the movie and having all kinds of problems with our bank loan that the bank ultimately didn't fund, and we had to find a new bank loan 3 weeks into shooting, and of course the usual production problems, which were very minimal actually. That was the easiest part of the whole process and also the hardest work but most enjoyable. We returned to L.A. in post-production, debating constantly over the end of this film. We must have cut it, I'd say a dozen different ways before we settled on what we had. And even then, in post, continued to tweak it with voiceovers, etc. Ultimately, after surviving, and I use that word purposely, the overwhelming experience of Sundance, which we were featured in, it was really an incredible experience. Every single screening was sold out, and there were fights, and people were scalping tickets. It was quite a scene for people to want to see this movie. We were simultaneously fighting the ratings board, and it turns out that this movie that we were so cautious about in every aspect of its production was receiving NC-17 ratings, not for content of the story, but for simple nudity issues. Nudity issues of men's buttocks thrusting or suggested penetration of body movement. And it was really ludicrous dealing with the MPAA because they'll just tell you, it feels too sexy or, we just feel that it's too over the top without any specifics. So you find yourself making cuts sort of blindly, not, really knowing where to go or how to fix it. And at some point, we finally got some information out of them after going to the media and sort of making a big thing out of it. We made those changes to find that, again, they wanted to give it an NC-17. Well, that was about enough, and I guess it sparked the fighter in me again, and we appealed, which is a process where the NPAA solicits a group of people who are either studio executives or part of NATO, and they screen the picture for them and stand up, and the chairman, Richard Hefner, was provided a half hour to discuss why the MPAA feels it's an NC-17, and of course I stood up and gave my half hour, which really basically was a a detailed comparison to other R-rated movies like Basic Instinct and 9.5 Weeks, and Body of Evidence, and The Lover, all of which, it's a very interesting process when you apply for a rating. They give you a little handbook, and there's probably less than a paragraph description of what an R-rated film is and what an NC-17 rated film is. Ultimately, as a filmmaker, the only thing you really can go by are your peers and the pictures that they have successfully had rated as R-rated films. And when you look at, obviously, Basic Instinct's everyone's favorite example, because I think there's 9 or 10, possibly 11 sex scenes or moments of nudity or adult situations in that film. Boxing Helena only had 2 love scenes, and outside of women's breasts and men's buttocks, was very tame in comparison of what it showed and how it did it. It was basically being punished for being sexy and erotic, but not being explicit. And that simple explanation won us a victory, I believe one of the first ever, in overturning an NC-17 without having to make any additional cuts. We continued to actually have problems with the MPAA even when we made the trailer. We showed them the trailer, and they said, well, make the following cuts, and assuming you can't see through Sherilyn's nightgown and see any of her private parts, it's going to be a green band trailer, which is a general audience trailer. Sure enough, we did it, and we went to the film process, which is a lot more expensive than cutting on videotape. We screened it for them as just a formality, and we were told once again, no, we're going to give you a red band. It just feels too sexy. Dealing with this abstract reasoning, it was a very difficult and expensive fight. We finally overcame the rating, or actually in the process of overcoming the rating problems as we entered into the court battle. And of course, the court battle was, 3, 4, 5-week trial of Mainline Pictures versus Kim Basinger. And ultimately, I believe the jury, I was told, found Miss Basinger guilty within 5 minutes and took a day and a half to figure the damages out. That was a stunning victory, and one which I'll never forget. It was a wonderful vindication, and truly a David and Goliath story. It was quite a difficult experience to walk down that hallway, and at the end watching a plethora of attorneys on her behalf defending her. In any event, we had a wonderful experience with Orion Pictures and the promotion of the picture domestically and internationally. And ultimately, in an attempt to move forward, just actually in the creation of this Laserdisc, found that a court of appeals overturned our verdict on a technicality, which was the collapsing her meaning Kim Basinger, into and her loan-out company, Mighty Wind, into one person. Apparently that violated her due process. So now in October of 1994, I'm not sure if we're going to, how things will work out. I just know that, like always, we're not going to give up, and if it means going back for a new trial, we'll be back in court. Hence, the history of Boxing Helena, and the final story has not yet been told, but it's a movie that lives on, and if